My research focuses on the influence process. So I study how people are influenced by information and by the media, and subsequently how that influences our judgments and decisions. And on the flip side of that, I study how people can resist influence when they don't want to be influenced by other people. So in short, I study how people are influenced and persuaded by both other people and by media and information. So some of the experiments we do, we look at how people are impacted by what they see in the media, what other people say, how they say it, the language that is used to persuade other people. For example, think about social norms and how normative information about what other people around us are doing impacts us, the way that media portrays news and headlines, the way that it's framed, whether they use emotional language or polarizing language. And so we look at all the different ways in which information and media impact the way that people think and feel about lots of social issues, from sustainability to science to leadership. So when we talk about information overload, I think what we mean is that, we're often busy and, information is just coming at us 1,000 miles an hour. There's information everywhere. We're being bombarded by information. And what that does to the human mind, basically, it puts the brain under a little bit of stress. And we know that if I stress you out, it becomes more difficult for you to process information accurately because we're resorting to heuristics or rules of thumb to decide on what's accurate and what's not, or what do we like and what do we don't like. And so under those conditions, it becomes harder and harder for people to remain accurate in how they process information. So for example, we might resort to a heuristic that I'm going to accept information from somebody I trust, or somebody who I like, or somebody that I support. So instead of actually listening to the content, because our brain is under stress, we're going to resort to these rules of thumb. And that's, oh yeah, I know that person, so whatever they're saying must be true, or that must be accurate. And those aren't always the best cues to judge what information is true and what's false. And in the same way, the media shapes how we feel about statistics and other people in society in the same way. And because we have limited cognitive bandwidth or limited attention, that really has an impact in the way that we're able to think about the information that's coming at us. So the media puts out lots of information. How do we know what's accurate and what's not? I think it's a really difficult question. I attended a panel a few years ago that was titled, "Is the Human Brain the Ultimate Fact Checker?" I don't think so, unfortunately. I think we do struggle with trying to discern what's accurate and what's not. And there are some useful heuristics that we can employ to try to figure out what's accurate and what's not. So for example, I think there's two cues in particular that are important. One is, it's helpful to determine what the political bias is of a certain news outlet, right? News media, they like to think that they're neutral, but all news media has a certain slant, and that's okay. Some news media is more left-wing, some news media is more right-wing. But I think it's helpful and transparent for people to try to think about what's the slant of a particular outlet as one particular cue, and the other is their accuracy rating. Some news outlets are rated as highly factual and accurate, and some just aren't by independent third-party fact checkers. So two useful cues to keep in mind are, is this news outlet accurate, and what is the political bias that comes with this information? And that empowers people to make an informed decision about whether they think something is accurate. Now there's lots of other tools, check sources. When you read an article, is there a source that is cited for the actual numbers and the evidence? The actual headline, one of my favorites is that if you see a headline and you immediately agree with it, then it's probably not true, because there's a lot of clickbait that goes on, meaning that headlines are framed in a certain way to make you feel particularly negative or positive. So if it sounds like clickbait, it's probably not true. So those are all sort of common tools that are put out there by media and fact checkers to help people make better decisions. And I think those are useful, but we've tried to do something that's quite different from what's already out there. Instead of fact checking and debunking, we've developed this idea of what we call pre-bunking. So the fake news game that we developed, Bad News, we've developed in collaboration with a real-world organization called Bad News, and it was sort of an academia partnership with the Media Collective that allowed us to actually put our theory into action and actually put the evidence out there and evaluate it. So the purpose of the game is really to let people step into the shoes of a fake news producer. So, you know, when people first hear that, they think that's a bit counterintuitive. But the method follows a medical analogy. So just as with regular vaccines, when you're injected or exposed to a small, severely weakened dose of a pathogen that triggers antibodies in the immune system to help confer resistance to future infection. And it turns out you can do the same with information, something we call inoculation theory. So inoculation theory suggests that if you expose people to a severely weakened dose of an information pathogen or an informational virus in a controlled setting, that allows people to build up cognitive or mental antibodies against fake news. And one thing we did with the game is move away from specific content, so we're not telling people what's true or what's false. In fact, fake news is changing all the time in terms of the specific story. So what we're doing is we're focusing on the underlying techniques that are used in the production of almost all misinformation. So things like conspiracy theories, the use of emotions to manipulate people, political polarization, discrediting other people, trolling, all of these sort of common online manipulation techniques. And you know, people started in the game as an anonymous netizen, and then they rise to manage their own fake news empire. But it simulates a social media feed, and you gain followers by spreading fake content while maintaining credibility, so you can't be too ridiculous because then you'll lose in the game. But what it does, it allows people to learn about these techniques in a controlled setting, and you know, the game is fun and humorous, and so we're not exposing people to the actual virus, but a severely weakened dose that allows people to sort of build up these antibodies to help the brain build its own natural defenses. We've tested this with about 15,000 people, and we find that after playing the game, people become more adept and better at spotting these misleading techniques in a whole range of fake news, and that's really the idea behind the game. I tend to use a magic show metaphor too. Right? The first time you go see a magic trick, you're usually duped by how the trick works because you don't know and it looks impressive. And so there's two ways to fix that. The traditional media literacy, fact-checking, debunking approach is here's a fact sheet, you know, here are the facts, here's how it works. But the other, and we think this is the better way, if you think about the psychology of human memory and the way people learn, is through experience. So our way is, why don't you let people step into the shoes of the magician and figure out how the trick works on its own? And that's really what we're trying to achieve. So when you think about how the media and fake news influences both society and people and the interaction between people and society, it has huge influence. So think about media. It doesn't have to even be fake news. Think about how your perceptions of other groups in society are formed. They're not formed in a vacuum. The media informs us about the number of crimes that certain groups commit in society or the way certain people vote or think. And so a lot of our ideas actually come from entertainment, movies, media. And so they have a huge, powerful influence in the way that we think about the world. And a lot of that isn't always accurate. Think about the false balance norm, right? That there always has to be a contrarian voice in the media versus the scientific consensus, which gives people the idea that, you know, the science isn't settled, while in fact there could be strong scientific evidence about a particular proposition. And so what we're trying to do with this game is not necessarily tell people what's right or wrong, but empower people with the tools to spot manipulation techniques online. And I think the societal implication of that follows the vaccine metaphor. If enough people are vaccinated, the informational virus won't have a chance to spread. And I think the spread of misinformation, and people say we've always had propaganda, we've always had media manipulation, and that's true, but now technology is enabling that spread so much faster and deeper than ever before. So if we want to limit that, I think we have to vaccinate people, and once online and offline communities, if enough people are vaccinated, the virus won't have a chance to spread and take hold. Even if, you know, not everyone is vaccinated, because that's the whole point of herd immunity, right? If enough people are resistant, it gives people protection. It gives those people who didn't have the vaccine also a certain amount of immunity, and it won't actually spread. And I think that's where we need to go in terms of our thinking about societal level immunity against these sort of media manipulation techniques in order to have an empowered and informed populace. So the game is free and it's available to anyone, and the plan is to keep it free as a tool to empower the public. But I think, especially when you think about leaders, they're in a position to influence other people. And so we were talking about the influence process earlier. If you're in a certain position, you have a huge responsibility also to help other people make the best decisions that they can make. And information plays an important role in that. And when you're a leader, you often have a certain amount of credibility. And so when you think about the way that people are influenced by other people, you can actually think about how you pass on a certain level of immunity or vaccination against bad information as well. So if you're in an organization, if you're a leader, you could think about ways in which you can help your organization make the best use of information and help employees sift through information that produces adaptive and favorable outcomes for the organization versus information that might be harmful. And so particularly when you're in the position of a leader, that might be a particularly fruitful opportunity to actually implement some of those techniques and help your employees discern information in the post-truth environment.